Anything that you could recall? What could be the
Only the thing that the army of Marathas were local army,
uh,
means local people were engaged with the army
uh,
service.
uh. See, thing is that many times these causes will have a tendency to overlap, get intermingle with each other. For example, geographically, that region of the southern part of India is far away from Central Asia, and with Central Asia like Turkey, Arab, and Afghanistan, that used to be the main recruiting ground for the army of Delhi Sultanate. Now, could you recollect anything? And as a result, what happened is as the southern Sultanate, Bahmani, and then many other Sultanate who arose on the when Bahmani Sultanate disintegrated, there were a number of Sultanate who came into existence in the southern part of India, like Adil Shahi, Nizam Shahi, Farid Shahi, Qutub Shahi, so on and so forth. Six. So they had to depend on the local people because you see the recruiting ground was far away and it is very difficult for large number of people to travel all the way from let us say Arab and Afghanistan across the whole of North India and go up to South. Still, number of people used to come, but that has gradually created a political situation where the local Marathas get entry into the politics because when that group was formed, if you remember, I told you about Deccanis and Pardesis. Do you
Yes,
remember
sir.
that? So
Yes, sir.
in the Sultanate of Deccan, these two groups used to quarrel for the resources, quarrel for the position. So what happened is, as the Pardesis and Deccanis, they were fighting among themselves. They used to try to they take the help of the Marathas to support their cause, and Marathas who were slowly rising, they used to change their allegiance. They will either support Pardesis if that benefited them, or they will switch over to the Deccanis. But mostly they supported the Deccanis because they had a kind of closer geographical affinity with them. Because though many of
Yes.
the Deccani Muslim, they were converted from Hinduism. So though the religion has changed, they did share certain cultural heritage. They had certain cultural similarities, and that is the reason Deccanis they gave a lot of space for the Marathas to rise up. Malik Ambar, in fact, he was an Abyssinian. Abyssinian people, who came from Abyssinia, they were Negroes. So, but the Negroes, they are supposed to be Pardeshi, who came from outside. But the Pardeshi group among the Muslim in the Deccan Sultanate, they really did not treat this Abyssinian very well. And Abyssinian people, generally, we found that having their group with the Deccanese Muslim, they used to uh, join hands with the Deccanese Muslims. So we have this combination: Deccani Muslim, Abyssinian, and Marathas joining hands together on the one side, and the Pardeshi Muslim who used to be Iranian, Turkey, Arab. They will be having a kind of group among themselves, and they will join together, and they will try to monopolize the administration, push their own people in the front. Is that clear to you? No, Vinod?
Yes, yes, sir.
So this is a broadly speaking political. You can explain it in that way. Geographically, as the southern part of India was far away from the main recruiting ground of Islamic Army of Delhi Sultanate, that is Central Asia, and there had been a number of these two groups, mainly Deccanis and Pardeshis, and that is how they started taking help of the Marathas, and the Marathas got involved into politics. They gradually trained themselves as a better soldier, and they gradually trained themselves as a better politician. And then they started, later on dreaming. If we are serving the Sultanate, we are killing the people for to save Sultanate, we are dying for Sultanate, then why not to have our own kingdom? And they started dreaming about the kingdom, and we find that that is actually manifest. All right, all right.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. Anything? Anybody else is having any doubts so far? Otherwise, we can go further and discuss further. Today, Alia and Jasmeet, who are generally regular, he has not yet Are you able to see me and PPT as well?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ha. Okay, good. So, we have, there are a number of causes behind the rise of the Marathas. And we have discussed generally these geographical causes, how this mountainous region had made these people very sturdy, and they made a very effective use of the guerrilla warfare as well as forts to protect their kingdom. And then political causes, see, these are the points in the political causes. Dekkani, Pardesi, and it gives space for the Marathas and led to the rise of the different Maratha family. And then another political inspiration was legacy of the Yadavas and Vijayanagara. Yadavas had a very extensive empire in Maharashtra till 13th century, and then Vijayanagara was also not very far away from Maharashtra, and these two empire, though they were defeated by the Sultanate army, but it did provide source of inspiration to the Marathas that we can have our own kingdom. Now let us go to the religious work of Islam. See what happened is, in your paper that is state in ancient and medieval India, you have a topic that is called Islamic theory of state. In the Islamic theory of state, which I used to teach in last semester, in the Islamic theory of state, what happened is Islam as a religion came into existence, and then in order to protect that religion, Prophet Muhammad has picked up a sword, and then it has become a combination of religion as well as politics both. Prophet Muhammad was not only a religious leader; he became political leader as well. And later on, we find that his successor, who are generally known as Khalifas,
Ah, yes.
they were also religious and political head of the whole Muslim world, at least in theory. So, by since inception, the Islamic theory of state says that protection and propagation of the religion is an important reason behind the existence of the state. So, state is always a secondary mechanism. It is a religion, at least in theory, which should be of paramount importance. And that is what we find that when Delhi Sultanate has established, they tried their best to preach and propagate and convert the people to Islam, as they believed that Islam is the only true religion. And this we generally find anywhere wherever the Arab has reached along with Islam, they generally try to finish off the other religious tradition and impose Islam, convert the people, sometimes by allurement and sometimes forcibly. That is how we see that Persia, which had a very very ancient religion called Zoroastrian, is almost vanished, and Parsi people, they, some of them during those periods, early medieval period, have taken shelter in India. And we have them Parsis, Tata, they're saying in Mumbai and it's a certain part of Gujarat, western coast. So now, in case of India, what happened is Delhi Sultanates have tried to do the same thing, but they could not convert the whole population to Islamic religion, and they had to somehow at this impose jizya and allow them to exist. But nevertheless, wherever the situation was favorable, or Sultan is more inclined towards Islam, more religious. He many times tried to convert the people, and this had been a policy of most of the Muslim rulers in India during the medieval period, till the time rise of the Marathas and rise of the Rajput, rise of the Sikh. Then that intention has gradually mellowed down with the breaking of the Mughal Empire. In case of Maharashtra also, what happened is when Devnagiri was the Yadava ruler of Devnagiri was defeated, and the occupation army of occupation of Delhi Sultanate, when they occupied Maharashtra, they made the Devnagiri as their base. Later on, Muhammad bin Tughlaq had also shifted his capital from Delhi to Devgiri, which he renamed as Daulatabad. And along with him, large number of Sufis also came to Daulatabad. And from Daulatabad, they spread in all direction in the southern part of India and in Maharashtra to propagate the true religion, which is they believe to be Islam. So we have a number of attack on Hinduism. Political attack where the state machinery was gradually used to convert the people to Islam, to force them, to give them allurement. For example, if there is a there is a dispute about, let us say, among the two brother about the agriculture land, ancestors agriculture land. Generally, many times it has been found that if the brother is willing to convert to Islam, that brother will be given the property. If somebody is willing to convert to Islam, he will be given post. And this Muhammad bin Tughlaq has done a number of occasions. For example, Harihar and Bukka, who were in fact founder of the Vijayanagara kingdom. Harihar and Bukka, who were Hindu, Sardar. They were fighting for the Hindu king against the army of Delhi Sultanate. They were captured and they were taken to Delhi. They were converted to Islam and sent back to southern India, because that was a strategy Muhammad bin Tughlaq and many sultans have used. They will capture the some of the Hindu Sardar, convert them to Islam, and then they believe that if the person is converted to Islam, most probably he will remain loyal to us, because among the Hinduism there was no system of reconversion. Once somebody has become Muslim, generally Hindus were not willing to accept him back to Hinduism. वो एक थोड़ी system उस समय थी, but in case of Hariharan, we know that Swami Vidyaranya has changed the tradition, and though Hariharan has become Muslim, they were reconverted back to Hinduism, and then they founded the
Nagara
Vijayanagara
Empire.
Empire. Vijayanagara Empire. Are you understanding the legacy? Just in a political, we discuss these political causes. The legacy, you see, when this kind of information has passed down from generation to generation, definitely it creates a kind of dream. It creates kind of inspiration that when Harihan and Bukka can establish a Hindu empire and fought against the Sultanate. This Vijayanagara, it was surrounded by the Sultanate, the Muslim ruler, and
Harmony.
they successfully fought against this Bahamani and the successor state of Bahamani. It is in fact these four sultans came together finally to defeat Vijayanagara. So this kind of history, this kind of legacy, this kind of history mixed with the legend continues to give inspiration. Now, as there was an all-out attack for on Hinduism, imposition of jizya, so on and so forth, and there was a lot of discrimination. But the saints came forward, from Ganeshwara in the 13th century to Ramadasa in the 18th century, in 17th century. We have a series of Bhakti Sant who had, kept the hope of Hinduism alive. They kept the pride of Hinduism alive among the people. So we'll start slowly. What does this topic Maharashtra Dharma will be discussing later on in little more detail as well. So these people have instilled the pride of two things. One is a pride of Hinduism, and another is pride of being a Maharashtrian person. And this combination of Marathi language, Maratha territory, as well as Hinduism, it combinedly came to be known as Maharashtra Dharma. Maharashtra Dharma is a term which is very difficult to define precisely, but it have a combination of these two things basically: pride of being a Marathi as well as pride of being a Hindu. And we have this pride being, being propagated time and again in the Marathi sense literature. For example, Ganeshwara, who wrote commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, which is generally known as Ganeshwari. I have this Ganeshwara so that you mistakes. Can you see this?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes.
so this is a Ganeshwari. In fact, it has become very big because what the editor has done is, this is a verse from Bhagavad Gita, and this is an explanation in the old Marathi, and this is an explanation in the modern Marathi, so that you can understand. See, the language always goes on changing. If I read this 13th century Marathi, I will not understand many words. and that is the reason this simple explanation is given. So in this Ganeshwari, which is in fact a religious text, Ganeshwar says that that is a beautiful Marathi poetry. माझा मराठाची बोलू कौतिके अमृताते ही पैजा जिंके. That is a archaic 13th century Marathi. What does that mean is that what should I say in praise of Marathi? The sweetness of Marathi is Marathi is even sweeter than Amrut, the nectar. So that kind of thought is being propagated to this Bhakti literature. See, before you have your empire, before you can fight for your empire, very important thing that the population should have is a pride. Is a kind of self-respect, and self-respect in their own language, self-respect in their own culture, self-respect in their own religion, and that is what these Bhakti Santa have tried to maintain and instill. Otherwise, the situation, political situation was that it's likely that most of the population is likely to go into depression. See, your temples are broken, your women are forcibly carried away, and you are being deprived of any avenue, any opportunity to grow. You are imposed taxes called jizya, the tax which is imposed on the non-Muslim population in the Islamic state.
tax,
Huh?
pilgrimage tax.
Yeah, pilgrimage tax. So that kind of atmosphere was generally have a very depressing effect on the population in general. But it was in fact the Bhakti Sant who kept this flame the pride of their language, the pride of the tradition alive. So we have from Ganeshwara to till Ramdasa who talk about the pride of Marathi, pride of Hinduism. Then we have another very important person, that is Eknatha. See, what happened is immediately after Ganeshwara's death, the Yadava Empire was defeated by the Delhi Sultanate, Alauddin Khilji, and after that there was a kind of lull. We don't find a lot of the literature coming into existence once the period of Ganeshwara is over. Ganeshwara's period, Ganeshwara and his contemporary like Namdeva and Chokhamela and Janabai, they produced a lot of bhakti literature. But immediately after that, around 200 years or so, there was no such bhakti literature. We don't have a lot of bhakti literature. It is there, but there are very few bhakti sants. And then comes the period of Eknatha in 16th century, who had a kind of he revived the bhakti tradition once again. There are a number of he was a person who has done a lot of writing. Number of abhanga, that is a devotional poetry in Marathi, was composed by him. Number of dharud, another form of poetry that is composed by him. And there are two important big texts that is composed by him. One is a commentary on the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Mahapurana, and that is written in Marathi. It is a very huge text. I am going to show you that also. See, just look at this. How bulgy. No, it is Eknatha's commentary on the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Mahapurana, and it is known as Eknathi Bhagavad. That is Eknatha's Bhagavad. So, and he composed another text. So the comparison between these two texts will give us an idea what kind of work Bhakti Sants were engaged into. You have seen the Bhagavad, and then I'll show you the another text that is composed by Eknatha, and this is in fact in two volumes, and this is called Bhavartha Ramayana, and this Bhavartha Ramayana volume 1, and this is volume 2. The cover is gone. Volume 1 and volume 2. And Bhavartha Ramayana, it retells the story of Ramayana. Ramayana story was known to Eknatha, it is known to the large number of Hindus. But he completely recreates the story of Rama in his Bhavartha Ramayana. Now,
Sir, is that Bhavartha Deepika same?
No.
Bhavartha Deepika is
Bhavartha Deepika is Ganeshwari.
okay. So this is Bhavartha Ramayana.
This is Bhavartha Ramayana. the original name of Ganeshwari was Bhavartha Deepika, but Ganeshwar never calls his text as Ganeshwari. He calls it Bhavartha Deepika, but it is later on, after his name, the text came to be known as Ganeshwari. All right. Uh,
Okay.
Now, this Eknathas, these two texts, like a little bit of comparison between these two texts will give us an idea how the Bhakti Sant have moved from Nivrutti to Pravrutti, that is withdrawal to action. You understand the meaning of these two words, Nivrutti and Pravrutti? Yes or no?
No, sir.
Okay.
No,
Pravritti is intention, I think.
Oh, what is that? Nivrutti is intention? No. Okay, okay. Anybody else? Anybody?
no, sir.
No, sir.
Well, you must have heard that phrase sometimes. निवृत्त हो गए, निवृत्त वेतन, निवृत्त होना. ये सुना है आपने? You have heard that?
Yes, sir.
क्या मतलब होता है निवृत्त होने का?
Retirement.
हाँ
Nivrutti, I guess it is retirement.
हाँ, निवृत्त मतलब रिटायर होना, विड्रॉ कर जाना, है ना? You are no longer active, you are no longer actively serving. That is called nivrutti. So nivrutti is withdrawing from something, and in Indian philosophical tradition, this nivrutti is having lot of influence. Like sannyasis are considered as a nivrutti. They will not have house, they will not have any property, they will not have any family, so they are withdrawing. Nivrutta ho jana. All right, and
Yes, sir.
opposite to this nivrutti is pravrutti. Pravrutti means
Appointment.
pravrutti, well, not exactly. Pravrutti means being oriented towards action. Nivrutti means withdrawing from action, and pravrutti means being oriented towards action. All right.
Yes, sir.
Just a minute, please hold on. Just 1 minute. Sorry. That is one of the fallout of the working from home. You get some of the disturbances. Well, nevertheless, it is good. So, you understood this nivrutti means withdrawing from the world. Like, sannyasis and sadhus and monks, they are on the nivrutti marga. They are on the path of nivrutti. They are on the way of nivrutti. So, they believe that withdrawing from the samsara, withdrawing from the world will get you God. You will become, spiritual person by withdrawing from the world. And then there is something called pravrutti. Pravrutti means it says that to get the God, to be spiritual, you don't have to really withdraw from the world. You can do everything everything that is required to be done, but keep focus on the God as well. For example, we have a very very good example of the text that tries to have a kind of understanding between this pravrutti and nivrutti, that is Bhagavad Gita. How many of you have read Bhagavad Gita a little bit at least?
Sir, I have.
Well, very good, very good. Anybody else?
Yes, I have also read.
Well, can you tell me a little bit, 2-3 sentences, what Bhagavad Gita tries to tell us, what it is all about?
That
Basically,
action.
Ha, one by one. Swapnil, go ahead. Go ahead, Swapnil.
sir, it is a conversation between Shri Krishna and Arjun,
Oh, okay.
and this exactly Sarth, जो life का Sarth है, it has been told in that.
Well, okay. What it is?
Sir,
Okay.
Sir, Nirvana, I think.
Sir,
Well,
that action.
Jasmeet, you go ahead now.
Sir, Krishna tells Arjun that karma is very important. That is, your action is very important,
Uh-huh.
and a man should strive towards fulfilling all his karma. That is action. He should not divert away from that.
Good, good. Well, okay. Meenal, you wanted to say something?
No, sir. I thought it was Nirvana.
It is well, nirvana, that concept is still there, and it plays a very important role in the Indian dharmic tradition. Well, okay, in short, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tries to reconcile between these two tendencies, pravritti and nivritti. What message it tries to give to Arjuna is that you should be physically active. You should be in pravritti, doing all your duty as a kshatriya, but psychologically you should be in nivritti. You should not have any desire to the fruit of action. Action is not to be abandoned, only desire to the fruit of action should be abandoned. You should dedicate everything to the divine. So that is a kind of reconciliation between pravritti and nivritti, and that is how we see that in fact the very important pioneering work that had given a kind of foundation to the bhakti tradition in Maharashtra, bhakti movement in Maharashtra, is just now what I have shown you. That is a commentary on Bhagavad Gita, that is a Ganeshwari, and the message of Bhagavad Gita is not completely nivritti. It is a pravritti plus nivritti, combination of both. So it encourages Arjuna, and through Arjuna to all of us, whoever read Bhagavad Gita or whoever read Ganeshwari, that to remain active physically, to do all your duties, to do all your assigned duties, to do all your karma, but still withdrawing psychologically, not to get too much engaged in the world, not to have attachment with the world. Do your duty, but not to have an attachment. It is a bit tricky thing, but that is what is the message that Bhagavad Gita and Ganeshwari tries to communicate. Now let us come to the text that I wanted to talk to you about. Eknatha's Bhagavata is. Do you remember? It is a commentary on what just now I told you sometimes back.
On
On
Bhagavad, on 11th chapter of Bhagavad Puran.
very right. 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Purana. It is a commentary on the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Purana. Now generally speaking, broadly speaking, Bhagavad Purana is having a very prominent influence of nivritti. I'll repeat my sentence once again. Bhagavad Purana in general is having a very prominent influence of nivritti. It says that word is an illusion, the word is Maya, and the person should withdraw. Though this is not the only message that Bhagavad Purana gives, it is not 100% nivritti text, but it is having a very predominant influence of nivritti, and that is the reason we find that Eknatha's Bhagavata, the bhakti in Eknatha's Bhagavata, is nivritti par bhakti, bhakti which propels the human being towards nivritti, which tells you that world is an evil place, it is a Maya, it is an illusion which will delude your mind, and you should withdraw from it. So the bhakti in this Eknatha's Bhagavata, in this text, is a nivritti par bhakti, which tells the people that withdrawing from the world is a better thing to do. But Eknatha himself was not a sannyasi. He was a householder. He was a married person having his family, having his son. Now what happened is, there, as Eknatha has moved to the latter stage of his life, there was a shift in his thought, and that is how this text Bhavartha Ramayana has came into existence. In fact, Eknatha could not complete this text. He died before that, and last few chapters are written by his disciple called Gauba. Now, the difference between these two texts, I already told you that Eknathi Bhagavat, the Bhagavata of Eknatha, gives you message of nivritti par bhakti, but the hero of Bhavartha Ramayana, is he a sannyasi? Tell me. Who is the hero of Bhavartha Ramayana?
Is it Ram?
Yeah, it is. Bhavartha Ramayana is nothing but a retelling of the Ramayana story, retelling of the Rama story. So the hero of Bhavartha Ramayana is Rama, and is Rama a sannyasi?
No.
He is a Kshatriya king who fight against the evil, and he is an exceptional warrior.
Yes.
He is a person who doesn't take the injustice done to his wife lying down. His wife is abducted, carried away, and he marshals the army of the monkeys and goes all the way to Sri Lanka, kills Ravana, and bring back his wife. Now tell me what message Eknatha is trying to give to the people.
Um, it's pravarti.
It is a pravarti part. So, he put an ideal of the brave Rama in front of the people so that the people can join hands together and rise against the tyranny, rise against the injustice that is done to them. It is not a nivrutti. You should not withdraw and become sannyasi. And there is a very interesting episode in the life of Eknatha, which I am going to tell you. What happened is Eknatha used to stay at the place called Paitan. That is a very famous place. It was a very famous place of learning. Just a minute. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
But my video has gone, it seems, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We can't see you.
Well. I'll stop sharing. Am I visible now?
Yes, sir.
Ha.
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
ha. Okay. Well, uh, where I was. Well, I wanted to tell you one episode in his life, which I guess, my research itself was on the Bhakti tradition of Maharashtra, which I guess was one of the contributory factor that has changed his mind. See, what happened is he was staying at Paitan, that was his ancestor's home, and at Paitan, the temple of Renuka Devi, the goddess Renuka, which was his family deity, that was broken by the Islamic invading army, and in place of that temple, a mosque was constructed, and that was one thing. And he was a Hindu Brahmin, and he had a practice to go and take bath on the river Godavari. Godavari flows through Paitan. I have seen that place, Paitan, and he will go every day, take bath, then come back and then do his puja and all that. Now, in that Paitan, as I told you, when southern part of India was conquered by Muhammad bin Tughlaq, he brought large number of Sufis with him, and these Sufis spread in all direction to spread the religion. One Sufi was also staying at Paitan, and he was a bit troublesome character. So as Eknatha was coming from river after taking bath, he stood at the on the bank of the river, that Sufi Siddhi Mola, his name was Siddhi Mola, and he spat on Eknatha. Eknatha was a person who was inclined towards nivrutti, not to give into anger, never to get angry. That he believed is not right for a person to get angry. So he goes back to river, baths again, and then comes back. This Siddhi Mola, he spats on him again. Eknatha goes back to again, take bath, comes back again. Now this is repeated. It is said that this is being repeated 100 times. 100 times that Siddhi Mola spat on Eknatha, and 100 times Eknatha has went back to the river and taken bath. And then it is said that Eknatha's peaceful disposition has finally led to the change of the mind of Siddhi Mola, and Siddhi Mola finally he surrenders to Eknatha and says that I'm holding your feet. Please become my guru. And so there was obviously change of mind. And now if you go to Paitan, you will still find that there is a samadhi of Siddhi Mola, Mazar of Siddhi Mola. And whenever the annual festival of Eknatha takes place, his palki, the procession goes very close to the Siddhi Mola's Mazar, and that was a wish of Siddhi Mola. He said that my Mazar should be there where the dust from the feet of Eknatha should fall on my Mazar. as I'm accepting him in my group. Now, the end is very good. Now, if you analyze it historically, you can understand that even the respectable person like Eknatha, what kind of humiliation he was subjected to, because Islam and the Sufis were supported by the people in power. All right. Now, if this thing, we have record of some evidences like Eknatha's evidences, but this thing must have been happening on larger scale, and that is how the people gradually felt that now Nivrutti is not going to serve our purpose. We need to be oriented towards action. We need to get united. We need to have our own kingdom. So that is what. Well, are you able to see PPTs? No. PPTs.
No, sir.
Okay, I'll share it. Ah, is it visible to you now?
Yes,
It
sir.
is.
Just well, okay. PPT and me both are visible now.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Okay, fine. So Eknatha's Eknatha's change are indicative in which direction that Bhakti movement has slowly moved. And after Eknatha comes Ramdasa, who was more direct. Because by the time rise of Ramadasa, Marathas were gradually becoming more and more strong, and it is during the lifetime of Ramdasa we find that Maratha kingdom, if not empire, Maratha kingdom have came into existence. Ramdasa has died in 1681, and Chhatrapati Shivaji died 1680, and Chhatrapati Shivaji was coronated in 1674. So the writing in Eknatha's this Bhavartha Ramayana is bit indirect. He urges the people, like it is a verse in Marathi in his Bhavartha Ramayana. तोडावया देवाची बांधवाडी उभारावया रामराज्याची गुढी. What does that mean? To break the foundation of the god, to free the gods from the foundation, and to establish the Ramarajya, the Marathis should come together. So he did not really very directly says anything against Mughal or directly anything against Adil Shah, because Maharashtra was still ruled by Adil Shah and Nizam Shah. But during the time of Ramadasa, he had no fear. In fact, he is a person who was very fearless. He called himself Samartha, that is capable. And in his writing, we find the attack on the Islamic atrocities perpetuated by the Islamic ruler was very, very direct, very strict, very straightforward. For example, in his long poem titled Anandavan Bhuvana, he writes that, बुडाला औरंग्या पापी म्लेच सहार झाला. Means Aurangzeb, who is an evil person, has budala, nast ho gaya. He has eliminated or exterminated. Mlech sahar zhala. Mlech is generally word used by the people who were outside the periphery of the Aryan society. So many that word was also used for Muslims as well. Mlech Sahar Zhala, the Muslims are being defeated, and the Aurangzeb is no more. He is no more. In fact, Aurangzeb has survived Ramdasa. Aurangzeb has died in 1707, and Ramdasa has died nearly 26 years before him. But he, in his text, in his poem, he put forward that dream in front of the Marathas. That time should come when we should unite together and exterminate Aurangzeb, and we should have a place where we can practice our own religion. Next. Well, and through their writing, we do come across certain sentences when working for the king who is prosecuting your religion, who is Yavana, the person who doesn't belong to you, who came from outside, serving for that king is not right thing for the Marathis to do, for the Hindus to do, and they kept the freedom of Hindu allow. But I just want to make one thing clear. Though these people, Marathi Bhakti Sant, though they preach and talk about the atrocities perpetrated by the Islamic ruler, they were not against the Islam as a religion, because Ramdasa, who is very direct. Who is very directly narrating the atrocities, while giving instruction to Chhatrapati Shivaji, how the fort is to be constructed. He also mentions that apart from the temple, there should be also a mosque on the fort. Mosque should also be constructed on the fort. Similarly, Eknatha, he also wrote a long poem called Hindu Turk Samvad. You know, many times the Muslims are combinedly referred as Turk because the Muslim who came initially, they were mostly Turkish. In that Hindu Turk Samvad, a Turk, that is a Muslim, and Hindu Brahmin, they engages into the dialogue, and the Brahmin says that Khuda, that is the god of the Muslim, they have made Hindus and Muslim both. You are forcibly converting Hindus to Islam, which is not a very right thing to do. In fact, there is no difference between the Ishwar and Khuda. And finally, the Islamic scholar, he comes around, he understands, and he accepts the opinion of that Hindu. So that kind of these poems, these dream, it might have been a imagination, but imagination gives us an insight into the what people are thinking about, what is the aspiration of the people, and the aspiration of the people was very clear through this bhakti text, that they people were dreaming about having their own kingdom where they can practice their religion freely, where they will not be persecuted, where the king will be just, and there should be Ram Rajya. And that is how we find that later on, when Chhatrapati Shivaji started his kingdom, he used to call his kingdom as Sri Charajya, that is a kingdom of God. Little bit about the social reason behind the rise of the Marathas. See, is there this point? Last point is clear to you. That is a work of the Bhakti Sant. Is there anything that you want to ask me before we go on to the next?
One question.
Yes, Jasmine.
So, Yavanas were basically Greeks, right? Indians called Greeks Yavanas.
Yes. That is very right. In fact, the mentioning of the Yavanas and description that is definitely about the Greek. But later on, all those people who came from outside, they were beginning to be referred as a Yavana, and later on, that term has been used as a kind of derogatory term. If somebody is Yavana, he is an outsider, impure person, unclean person. And same thing with the Mlech. Mlech is also a word which generally used as a person who were outside the periphery of the Aryan, but then later on it became a derogatory term. Somebody who is impure, who doesn't belong to the Hinduism. In that way, the word Mlech is used. And in fact, there is a book written on the word called Mlech. That is the kind of research people are doing. They take the one word and historically how it has developed, which way it has been used, they go on working on it. So what you are pointing out is very right. Yavanas, that was a word initially used for the Greek. In fact, the curtain is, what the curtain is called in Sanskrit? Anybody?
No, sir.
It is called Yavanika. Yavanika, because linguistics, people who study language, they believe that has came to India from Greek. When the Greek came, they brought this curtain, a use of curtain, and then we call it as an Yavanika. Like, so linguistic study could be very interesting. Well, anything else?
No, sir.
Well, anybody else? Otherwise, shall we go ahead and talk about the social causes behind the rise of Marathas? There are not many because, one way or another, that has came in the writing of the Bhakti Sant. And, in the social causes also the work of Bhakti Sant was very important. Because, see, Bhakti Sant have not only talk about the atrocities perpetrated by the Muslim, a significant portion, even much more than the atrocities perpetrated by the Muslim, significant portion of the Bhakti literature talks about the atrocities perpetrated by the upper caste on the lower caste. So, in a way, it challenges the dominating position of the Brahmins. They said that religion is not something that is to be dominated by the Brahmin. Religion belongs to everyone. God belongs to everyone. And that is the reason Tukaram. Tukaramas okay, that is also very huge text. I'll show it to you later on. So, Tukaramas Abhanga, in Tukara, he was a cultivator, Shudra, Kunbi by caste. But he says that Vedaचा तो अर्थ आमासीचा ठावा इतरांनी व्हावा भार माथा. That means he says that what is there in the Vedas is really known to us by the devotees, and the Brahmins who preach about, who talk hi-fi languages, who speak in Sanskrit, they are just carrying the burden of the knowledge. They really don't understand the essence of religion. And that is the reason we find that within the Bhakti tradition, large number of sons cutting across the caste. For example, Ganeshwara was a Brahmin, Eknatha was a Brahmin, but then we have Chokha Mela, who was a lower caste. He belonged to Mahar caste. They were untouchables. But he composed beautiful poetry, and in fact, his poem were written down by a person called Ananta Bhatta. Namdeva was a tailor by caste. Janabai was a maid. Gora was a potter. The people cutting across the caste came together, and that has resulted in breaking down the barriers between the castes. In any case, the region like Maharashtra never had a Varnashrama system or the caste system as rigid and strict as we have in the northern side. In the northern side, the domination of the Brahmin is much more. Probably Shweta knows it. And in comparison, Maharashtra was a kind of little bit, not exactly, I will say, relatively it was an egalitarian society, and not like I have worked in Northeast for 7.5 years, and Northeast is much more egalitarian. Tribal society, they don't have the caste hierarchy. They are much more egalitarian, because you see they are staying far away from the main heart of this Brahmanical civilization. That is Bihar and UP, from where they in fact originated and spread in all direction. So as Maharashtra was also hilly terrain, difficult to penetrate, it was not possible to have such a very strict caste hierarchy. People need to cooperate with each other. The more hard pressed you are for the survival, the less you will be inclined to put up with all this kind of discrimination and nonsense. So, in any case, the social atmosphere in Maharashtra was relatively liberal, and the work of these Bhakti Sant, who were called, you heard the word Warkaris?
Yes, sir.
What is that? What is that? Tell me.
We heard the word only. We have no idea. Varkari, I know the people who went for religious purposes or else something.
Yeah, very, very right. You are very close. Anybody else?
It is a sect.
Aha.
It is a religious sect.
Well. See, the word has originated from the word wari. Wari is a Marathi word, which means pilgrimage. Pilgrimage. All right. So the Vithala at Pandharpur, he was a rallying point for this Bhakti tradition in Maharashtra. Vithala is considered as the incarnation of Krishna, and people go there twice in a year, Ashadi and Kartiki. Ashad and Kartik, these both are Hindu months, and the Purnima, that the full moon day in the Ashad and Kartik day, they have a huge gathering at Pandharpur, and people are supposed to go there. So this pilgrimage, which twice in a year when the people go there, that is called Wari, and people who go there for a Wari, that is pilgrimage, came to be known as Warkaris. So Warkaris were the group of the people who were devotees of Vithala, and they used to gather at Pandharpur wherever it is feasible. It was not a very compulsory. Some people do not go at all, but they can be still called Warkari. So this Warkari tradition, they had a tradition. Whenever they meet at Pandharpur, they will touch each other's feet. And there at Pandharpur during that pilgrimage twice in a year, any differences between the caste, gender and age, even if the Warkari is younger to you, the elderly person will also go and touch his feet, believing that there is a God in him. He is the Vithala incarnation. Have you ever gone to Shegao? Shegao is a very important pilgrimage place of the Hindus, which is not very far away. Well, in Shegao, the people who are looking after the temple, they will call everybody as Mauli. Have you heard that word, Mauli?
Yes, sir.
What?
Gajanan Maharaj Mandir.
What is the meaning of Mauli?
I.
Mauli is mother, and that word is in fact used for God. That word is used for Gajanan Maharaj, the son. And they see that same sant or same God in everybody around them, and they call everybody as a Mauli. So, if you call everybody, if you treat everybody as a God, if you treat everybody as a sant, if you go down to everybody, obviously it will have certain impact on your mind when the caste discrimination, the feeling of superiority and inferiority will be it will take a backseat. At least if cannot be eradicated altogether, definitely it will lessen the intensity of the dislike, intensity of the barrier that you had between the caste. So this work has done by the Wargaris. They have reduced the caste differences to significant extent, and they allowed the sons from all the castes to come together and in a way prepared a kind of society from where you can draw the soldiers cutting across the coast, and that is the reason Marathas had the soldiers cutting across the coast. Everybody could fight. He could be a farmer, he could be a person who cleans the village, lower caste, Brahmins, everybody became fighter in due course when they find an opportunity. But before they become fighter, they have to come together and cooperate with each other. So that kind of background is prepared by these Warkaris, that kind of background is prepared by this son. And then we have left with last 2 points. In this social causes, anything is it clear to you? Is that clear to you? You have to write that the Bhakti son have brought the society together. They have reduced the caste differences. That is the main message that Bhakti sant have you in case of social differences. Is that clear? Anything else? Any doubt you have?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Well, okay. Now let us go to the last slide. That is work of Shahaji and rise of Shivaji. Shahaji was very capable person. In 1624, he tried to protect Nizam Shahi along with Malik Ambar. He fought against the combined army of Mughal and Adil Shah and defeated them. And later on, he entered into the service of Adil Shah. And the Mughals were aware of the capability of Shahaji, and they said to Adil Shah that keep him away from Maharashtra, give him assignment in South. And Shahaji, as a representative of Adil Shah, was sent to southern part of India. And in southern part of India, on the behalf of Adil Shah of Bijapur, he conquered large territory and he established almost like a court at Bangalore city now. And he used to live like an independent ruler, almost like an independent ruler. He used to patronize the scholar, give them grant. In a way, the way for Shivaji was prepared by Shahaji. Shahaji's second son he became independent at Tanjore later on, and then in Maharashtra we have Shivaji taking inspiration from all that thing that has happened, Bijapur and Vijayanagara and the Yadavas and the stories, the work of the Bhakti Sant. It is stated that Jizabai used to tell him the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata, the brave heroes from Ramayana and Mahabharata, and they used to give him inspiration. The keeping alive with the tradition of Ramayana and Mahabharata is done by this Bhakti Sant. We have Bhavartha Ramayana in front of us, we have Ganeshwari in front of us, and Shivaji, apart from all this inspiration, apart from all this background that was prepared by the Bhakti Sant, that was prepared by the variety of reason, it was in fact his own personality and his own capacity was also responsible for the rise of the Marathas. He was the person who could bring the people together, take very strict action whenever it is required, and in a way he has pioneered his way ahead and formed the Maratha kingdom. So we have covered all the points about the different factors that led to the rise of the Marathas. Any doubt you have about this so far?
Mm-hmm. No, sir.
No, clear to you? Well, Jasmeet, apart from the books that I have told you on the Google Classroom, this is also a very good book.
So what's the name?
Just a minute. Oh, my webcam is getting disconnected. Just hold on. Yes. Am I visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. This is the book Shivaji and His Times by Jadunath Sarkar. So this is also very good book. And you want to note it down?
Yes, sir.
And then a Rise of Maratha Power by Ranade, by M.G. Ranade. This is also another book. And yeah, this is a book which I have purchased when I was a student. This is generally gives you an kind of comprehensive idea about the uh, Maratha, but I think it is out of print. But later on, let few days go. Later on, when the situation is right, you can get a Xerox. That is History of Marathas by Professor K.M. Desai. It is probably out of print. I purchased it long back when I was a student, but it doesn't give you too much of detailed information. But nevertheless, it is helpful to give you a bit of idea. And well, just one or 2 points before we conclude. Uh, this is a text called Yoga Vasishtha. You know, when I was talking about the Pravritti and Nivritti, I should have shown you this text, but somehow it has slipped my mind. Yoga, like in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna had a doubt. He wanted to withdraw, doesn't want to fight. Similarly, in this text, Rama wants to withdraw. He wants to take sannyasa. And there is a dialogue between sage Vasishtha and Rama, in which Vasishtha tells him how it is not right for you to withdraw and become a sannyasi. You can do your work and psychologically, mentally be detached from the world. So, in Indian tradition, there had been always conflict and reconciliation between these two attitudes, that is Pravritti and Nivritti. This is what Yoga Vasishtha is. And this is a very famous book on Vithala. Vithala, I told you the rallying point of the Maratha Bhakti movement, which is at Pandharpur. In fact, I have written a chapter on Vithala, which is published in an encyclopedia of Hinduism. I will share that with you. I have written also one chapter on Eknatha. That also I'll put it on the classroom. You can just go if not engage very seriously with those two paper, because that will be too much fun for you. But you can just go through it once. It is around both the paper combinedly will make around 20-25 pages. So there's something will remain at the back of your mind. How Vithala has, provided, became a kind of rallying ground where the Marathas cutting across the caste, they came together. Interestingly, among the Warkaris, there are some Muslims as well. There are some Muslim people who also go on pilgrimage and they call themselves as a Warkari. So it was a kind of liberal movement who did not really believe in any discrimination based on the caste and religion. Everybody was welcome. And that is how they prepared a background for the Marathas. The only thing that was binding is Marathi language and Hinduism. Hinduism, in a sense, not discrimination against any other religion as well. They have a very simple rituals. The priesthood is contested if it is not rejected altogether, because we still have Brahmins worshipping at Pandharpur. But nevertheless, it is contested. They say we don't give a lot of importance to the Brahmins. Brahmins are not superior anyway. One more text, that is Ramdasa's text. I'll be showing you this text again when we'll be discussing about Maharashtra Dharma. These are Namdeva's Abhanga, and this is a text, a very famous text of Ramdasa, Dasbodh. Dasbodh is a text which is written by Ramdasa, and then apart from this text, he has written, composed quite a good number of poetry. So I think this is where I have finished today. Anything else? Any doubt you have? Anything that you want to ask?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Sir, the religious causes were
Uh-huh.
mainly revolved around the Bhakti movement.
Yes, that is. In fact, Bhakti movement has played a very important role in giving shape to modern Hinduism, what we call modern day Hinduism. We have a lot of things that came from this medieval Bhakti tradition, as well as new Hinduism movement that came during the colonial period. See, we don't, the Hinduism of today is quite different than the Hinduism of Rigvedas. We don't, Hindus no longer worship the Indras and Varunas. Do we? Hindus, I mean? No, we don't. We worship the god that has mostly became popular during the medieval Bhakti movement, that is Rama and Krishna, so on and so forth. Alright?
Yes.
So, the giving shape to Hinduism was a very important work of the Bhakti tradition, as well as religious causes. They brought the Marathas together. This is the pride of Marathi language and Hinduism. Alright?
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
Mhm.
Okay, so tomorrow, as you know, tomorrow there will not be class, so we'll be meeting on Friday, and Friday we'll be discussing about Maharashtra Dharma, that is some more little in detail in the work of the son. And if the time permits, we can switch over to the next topic as well. So I'll upload that is probably Shivaji's relationship with Adisha next unit. So I'll upload your reading material. So
सर
yes.
सर जो आपने पीडीएफ भेजा गूगल क्लासरूम में सर उसमें सर शकावली के बारे में कुछ डिस्क्रिप्शन नहीं है एक्चुअली सर
स्वाति, मैंने लास्ट क्लास में बताया था कि शकावली के ऊपर मेरा जो लेक्चर है ना और मेरा जो लेसन है वो अभी रेडी नहीं है फिलहाल, है ना, तो उसको
यस सर यस
उसको अभी छोड़ दिया है मैंने, उसको हम लोग बाद में करेंगे जब भी समय मिलेगा। आई लेट यू मे बी लास्ट लेक्चर, इसको फिलहाल छोड़ दीजिए,
ओके
गो टू द नेक्स्ट, ठीक है ना?
ओके सर
ठीक है,
थैंक यू।